I am unashamed. What about you?
So last night we had a birthday party. It was your birthday. Happy birthday, by the way.
Hey,
I forgot to give you a card. Are you hurt?
there's not much. There's not much happiness involved when you get to be 76.
So maybe we should just say birthday.
I said, why don't you just tell it like it is? Time is growing nigh.
What that means?
I don't know. It's not. It wasn't happy. That's why I didn't call you.
Yeah, I'm happy. All right, I'm 4 years this side of 80. Yeah, I'm jumping up and down about that.
Well, some people
You don't realize that till you get there, and then you say, well, what you know, I done turned into an old man here.
Sometimes
I like it because your old man get away with a lot more than a young man.
Oh, there's no doubt. Yeah, because look, old people.
Because they just say, well, some old guy out there ranting and raving.
And you say whatever you want. You
somebody
can
hollering
trash
about
somebody.
Jesus, some old coot hollering about Jesus, you know, he's a nut.
Yeah.
You can say something about the way people look, and they're just like,
oh, yeah.
it's an old man. That's what he does.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Their driving is just ridiculous.
Oh, yeah.
They don't look, pull out.
Oh, yeah.
Worst thing can happen to me, put me in the ground. Oh, well.
Seinfeld said but you've earned that. The speed limit ought to be your age as you're older. You're 80, you're going to be able to drive 80, which I don't know, that'd be funny. So Willie, Willie's I guess I should say Willie and Corey because he didn't really plan it, but they're the king of the party, big tent parties.
Oh, yeah.
They love the big tents out on the lawn. They got their big house.
Oh, yeah.
And so Corey planned up, Willie turned 50.
Crowds can gather within minutes.
Oh, yeah. And they did. And it was funny because they were like, so the chef, you got a couple of chef friends from Alabama. They came up. They stayed at my house.
But this was mostly close kin?
Yeah, this was family and then some like really close friends. Roachy was there. And,
they gave me such a hard time about showing up after it was over. But
I was going to mention that.
Well, I never got invited. I mean, because I come in over there and Willie's like, you're just not getting there? It's over. I said, perfect.
well, when he was up on so it was a roast, and it was, so there were about 6. It was me and John Luke, Zach were family, and then you have Martin, LaRoche, and
Did you get invited to this?
Yeah, you did too. They mailed it to your house, but you don't get the mail.
When's the last time I read the mail?
Somebody walked by and said, but I notice these gigs now, you can miss one on the first part of the week, but there's always others popping up. If you just go with birthdays, you get 50, 60 people, kids.
Well, especially in Corey's family.
Distant kin, close kin, when you can form a party can get unleashed within seconds.
Well, I have to say, to be fair to Jay, so Jace was sleeping, so I
took a nap.
He got there just as the band cranked up.
I got there, because I heard boom, 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 and I thought, oh, that's what Mia was talking about. Because Mia came by, but I
mean, this thing here was with music.
Oh,
I went to bed.
They don't do parties without bands.
I went back to bed at midnight. And I had to go get a box fan and turn it on because when I lay down in bed, it was boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, that's why our neighborhood loves Willie so much.
This is the first one that your mother has walked up to me and said, I'm just too tired to go. I mean, I just don't want to go.
It's not a good call because that thing got cranked up.
I said, well, call Willie and tell him. I said, break his heart, but you call him and tell him. I said, whatever you want to do.
It's funny. It did kind of, so he was assuming that Mom was going to get up and say something about him. So he had prepared a whole rebuttal to her roast.
Yeah.
Assuming she was going to be.
She just didn't show. That's the best roast possible.
It is. And then he said that. He told the whole thing because she called and she said, I can't come, Willie. I have diarrhea. Is what Willie said. She said.
Yeah.
And so
he might have made that up.
Maybe so. But so we roasted him. And so then he does the rebuttal. And so when he gets up, and Willie's pretty quick because he didn't know what we were going to say. So he's over there making notes while we're ripping him. And so he gets up, and the first thing he says is, I just want to thank my mom and dad for being here tonight. You know, just they've been so good to support me. And all. He goes through the whole thing. Everybody's just rolling, you know. Then he's like, Jase, are you here? And it was nothing. He said, oh. And then everybody started laughing, and he said, that wasn't even a joke. I mean, I literally thought he was here.
I wasn't there. I was sleeping.
And then he was like, Jeff, are you here? Nothing. So I'm sitting up on stage. Of course, you know, he's about to rip me to shreds anyway, which he did. And he said, Al, I guess you're the only one that cares about me. And then he rips me for, 10 minutes, calls me a fat pig and everything else.
Yeah.
Well, that's
but
funny.
It was funny. It really was. I mean,
I hate I missed it.
If you were going to do it, that's the way to do it.
I got to see everybody. And
so my roast was, I knew everybody'd I knew they'd be talking about his weight and all that, which Willie's actually lost weight. He's in pretty good shape now. But so I knew they'd go there. So I went for the all the different hairdos he's had through the years. And so Corey helped gather me some pictures. So I did, mine, preacher. I did mine PowerPoint style, but it was funny. It was just some funny. So he's had some looks through the years. Willie, at one time he was Dapper Dan. He had the frost tips and the bleached hair and the he peeled it one time, and he had a lot of different looks through the years. So it was pretty fun.
Yeah. I hit the important part.
You got. Well, everybody started laughing when Jase walked in. I was leaving literally because when the band gets cranking, that's when I'm at home. But because you can't talk over all these people. I'm about getting like you, Dad. I can't hear well with a lot of racket like that. Oh, yeah. So then I start shouting. Well, then I didn't have a voice for the podcast. So I was like, I got to leave for the good of the team. But it was fun. It was.
It just kind of fits in with what we're fixing to go over on these 4 chapters in a subtle way with the. A lot of people have trouble of laughing at themselves.
That's right.
Or thinking of themselves way too mightily. And there's fixed to be a lot of
it's funny you said that because...
we pretty well, y'all, through the family structure, pretty well shucked all that.
Well, here's a couple of things I observed, Dad. They were interesting. One was that I thought to myself when I got home, and Melissa's down and Zach, so we were just sitting around talking, and I said, there aren't a lot of families that could do what we just did. Like, we're throwing each other on the bus, everybody's laughing. I mean, it gets personal, but it's like nobody's, we're not sensitive to ribbing each other. But I thought a lot of families would be so sensitive about just joking. I was like,
cause of that is.
Well, I don't know, but I thought people would be mad. They wouldn't talk to each other. How dare you say that? So I thought a lot of families couldn't have pulled off what we just did. I mean,
but some of our culture exhibited our interaction, our family structure, 50, 60 of us now. If they exhibited that type of behavior, they would be stunning.
Yeah,
this would be rare.
Oh, exactly.
I mean, nobody's mad at anybody.
No, and you walk away. It was funny. I mean, we had a good time.
I guess it does call for a thick skin, but, from interaction from 50 years ago and interacting with one another, now, at least everybody's laughing.
Well, right. Here's what I think, Dad. My theory is that people have different mechanisms of dealing with hard times or, not having a lot. And I think that's what we did.
Sins,
we always
their mistakes.
We always just kind of just took it in stride and had a sense of humor about it and kept going. We know we didn't have anything. We came from nothing. But I mean, that's part of the whole allure of it all now. The other thing I observed was that Willie himself, he talked about Cy. He said, Cy he's called me every fat joke in the world on the Duck Show. And he said, I wrote all those lines. And he did. He fed them to Cy to say about him because they were funny.
Yep, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. And he said that last night. And he said, Cy delivered it. Cy probably would have never said that. But Willie was telling him, call me this, say this, the whole time, wasn't he, Jay? I mean.
Well, because Cy is the only one of the cast that really you just, no matter what, you could tell him to say something. And it's like he just thought of it.
Yeah.
Everybody else, he can't pull it off.
Oh, exactly.
And he loved those ideas.
Oh, yeah. But my point is that you got to have some pretty good self-confidence to feed people, jokes about the way you look. Oh. On national television. And yet he did it. And I think that was the spirit of the whole thing last night, which was a lot of fun for me. It's my style of sense of humor, so I enjoyed it. It was funny. So I'm sure he threw y'all on the bus, which that was good too. So That made it all worthwhile.
I got pretty thick.
So what
skin.
about, so Missy's birthday was, what'd you do? Did you do, her birthday the same day as Willie's. Did you do anything special this year?
Willie's actual birthday is, mine
22nd.
was yesterday.
Yours is 24th. His is 22nd.
22nd.
Yep, 2 days before.
So tomorrow.
And
is
Missy.
Yeah, you should know this, but it's okay.
So it's officially, he's
50 now.
50 tomorrow.
No, he was 50 last Friday.
Oh, that's why they did such a big deal.
Yeah, it was his 50th, yeah. It was last Friday day. He's 2 days before.
I gave him a Hondo.
Oh, yeah,
so
that's
I
right,
doubled up
22nd.
his-
Yeah, Size is coming up. His is at
27th.
tomorrow. Size is tomorrow.
I gave him a Hondo, and he looked at me strangely. I was like, I just think the reason I do that because nobody else would do that. These guys.
Yeah, that's right.
Somebody emailed me and said, did Jase give Willie $50 bills?
No, he gave me 50-50.
On the podcast.
I just gave him a Hondo.
Yeah.
So if I keep this up, I'll eventually pay him back off. So
Yeah. Well,
probably with interest.
I'll go on the record saying he gave me nothing.
Plus, Willie is the one. I guess Jase is close there, but not quite.
No, we're pretty
But
close.
he's operating out of somewhat of a palace, I would say. I mean,
I call it the Taj Mahal of Arkansas.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
What?
yeah.
I'm close to that. So, Phil,
I'm
my
just-
house is 75 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, I fixed it up, but
I never went the big house route. Let's get a bigger house. Because everybody pulled out and they say, you need a bigger house because now you're famous. You know, they build big houses. I'm like, no. I said, I'm staying in where we started. I said, I paid it off. I don't owe any money. I'm not going up.
That was one of Willie's.
I got my house next to nothing. I mean, it was.
That was one of my Willie's roast to me. He said, Al's the only one that he didn't get rich and famous, but he lives like he did. He said every time he's in the Bahamas, every
you
other
looked
weekend.
around, Al, and you said, well, okay, now.
pretty funny.
Which that was pretty funny. That was a good. He said then he puts a trailer in the neighborhood and then he moves to Florida. So now I got to look at his trailer every day.
So to answer your question, because last week that's why I was taking a nap. We were doing those promos for the show this week.
Last week was brutal.
And I mean, the way this works, because a lot of y'all are probably wondering how this works. You film the show, well, then you do the promos for the network that they call them teasers. But when you do those, it's way bigger crews, way bigger cameras, but the segments are real short.
Mm-hmm.
So they're like 15, 20 seconds. And you just do random things. It seems a little silly, but they're trying to put stuff on the internet or on TV that people say, huh, maybe I should watch this show.
Right. Just little teasers.
So we did that for a few days, but that was right leading into Missy's birthdays. So I kept trying to get out of there because I was like, I got to get something for her birthday, but it just, these things went on. I mean, they were pretty much from daylight to dark. And so I wound up.
Sounds nightmarish to me.
It was. And so I called this flower shop, and I was like, I want the best thing you got. Put it, because I thought that's all I can do. And so I got her perhaps one of the greatest display of a flower arrangement that you've ever seen. I should have taken a picture.
So what did that set you back? A couple of hundred?
Oh, more than that.
Ooh,
but you're
really?
right.
Oh, you dug deep, Jay.
You're getting up in
It
dad
was
territory
slightly
now.
over a couple hundred. It wasn't 300.
My territory.
Yeah, I know how you buy those flower arrangements.
Oh, that's
But look, a lot of them had the blooms in them, so like they're just now blooming. I mean, it looks pretty spectacular.
Oh, it's spring. Yeah, she's got the
Yeah.
perfect time for a flower birthday.
And I mean, she's at, what do you get? You know?
Yeah, what if she
at this
doesn't need
point,
anything?
I mean, a couple $100 for some flowers. I mean, it was, and she seemed happy. But
That's just one program for you guys.
Yeah, I actually had, played cards for the first time in a long time. So that
So you get your flower money all lined up.
yeah.
money. Yeah, it's the way the economy works, Phil.
Yeah.
And so I was excited about that. She's visiting the grandbaby.
Yeah, you
so.
can't ever have enough of that. Let's take a break. So I had fun coming up with for Willie's roast. I did a hairstyle thing about all his different hairstyles through the years, and it was a lot of fun. But it's interesting because you start looking back, Jason, on pictures of yourself, and you see the changes. You know, I mean, over time, you know, I just kind of did a little, 40-year run, for Willie. So a lot of people do that. They look at photos of themselves and they start realizing, you know what, I'm losing hair at a rapid rate. I mean, it hasn't really happened to us, but it happens to a lot of people that the male pattern baldness kicks in early. So one of our longtime sponsors is a company called Keeps. They're clinically proven, FDA-approved hair treatments, and so it's available online. So it helps you prevent the hair loss and stimulate hair growth to really kind of keep the hair that you have. So that's their idea. No waiting rooms, no pharmacy visits. Keeps is delivered straight to your door at about half the cost. That's half the cost. So check these guys out. If balding jokes are wearing thin, join thousands of guys who have saved their hair. Visit keeps.com/door for 50% off your first order. KEEPS.com/door. That's KEEPS.com/door. Check them out.
But we all taught yesterday, huh?
I preached the second half. It's kind of funny because I said yesterday, all the years I preached at WFR, I've never heard of a second Easter, but that's the way I frame my, because the Easter Sunday, Mike and I did the first half of 1 Corinthians 15. We timed it out where that'd be the Easter sermon. It was good. And then yesterday I went back on the second half about the resurrection body, in that second half of that text. But man, somebody was like, man, that's the best sermon I ever heard. I said, well, look, be honest with you, this text will preach itself. I mean, you ain't got to say much. You just read 1 Corinthians 15, you got a sermon, Well,
that's actually interesting because I went through Colossians, and people have been wondering where we're going to next.
I think that's where we're headed.
That?
We haven't decided, but I think we have because I didn't know you were teaching yesterday, and then I had a guy from one of our elders at WFR said, you and Mike are to preach through the book of Colossians because this is one of my favorites.
That's so weird that I taught that yesterday.
Yeah, and then I did it in and told you that.
1 hour, but I mean, I don't mind getting in and rolling the sleeves up and getting into that Colossians.
Colossians is rich.
We had a couple, and they asked me, could they... we've got a baptistry there at the little place we are, but they said they just wanted to be baptized in the river, like remind them of the old days, and they had never obeyed the gospel, but they said they watched this podcast right here. Mm-hmm. And the more they watched, they said, They said, we need it.
I talked to I kind of set it up, but Jason was his name,
they had
Jason and Devin, his wife, a couple of young boys, but it was a great baptism. Tony went out and filmed it, and he's going to do a print for them.
Oh, that's cool.
Of their baptism.
Yeah.
Like coming forth from the water, It did look pretty cool. It was Tony was out there, the artist.
Yeah.
So he was on board, he and Phyllis. So we walked down on the riverbank, and we just drove from there down there. And he said, man, what a day this has been. I said, well, today's my birthday. And it's the day you two happen to be born again.
It's the new birthday.
They were like, man. I said,
they'll never forget that.
Oh, they said, we will never forget this day.
That's pretty special.
It was a cool thing. All you listeners out there, don't forget that,
They had, they did down the street from y'all's church, they did a women's retreat. And I heard them say they had Cassady there, and she spoke yesterday. It was really good. I slept in there and heard it. And they had 31 baptisms last night.
Oh, wow. That's pretty cool.
The night before.
I told Sadie, I saw her. I knew she was speaking, and I said, did you lay one down today? And she said, I laid one down, Uncle Al. I said, well, I did too. I was at the other end of the street. We got both ends of North 7 covered.
Yeah.
Yeah, she did it on, really that, when we read the verse in 2 Corinthians, where was that at, about the promises? Since we have these promises, 2 Corinthians 7:1, because she did it on God being a promise keeper versus the empty promises.
Oh, that's good.
Boy, she got to the end and she listed off about 20 of the promises, because it was more just listening to like the world. They promise the same things, but they're just empty.
Yep.
That was basically her lesson. But and she read off the 20 of the promises
kept.
Yeah, the 20 of them, and it was a little. She went out on a riff there that was. I mean, the audience they were just clapping at They were kept trying to clap, but she kept going. They kept clapping, and finally they just all clapped. I mean, it was really good, and the energy in there was phenomenal. So
yeah, Mom and Lisa, because they were on our podcast last week talking about their new book, Sister Roar, which, by the way, you can check that out, Amazon. Leave a review. She said that they did Sadie's podcast, and Lisa and I have done a lot of interviews with big media, and all of us have. And Lisa said that Sadie was one of, if not the best, one of the best interviewers she's ever been interviewed by on the podcast. And which, yeah,
she was probably prepared.
Well, that's right. Unlike, I shouldn't say unlike us. Unlike you, Jase, she actually prepares for our podcast.
1 Peter 3:15.
Yeah, there you go.
Always be prepared.
But I never thought about that because I've never listened to her interview somebody. But I mean, for Lisa to say that, what I'm saying is she has some experience in being interviewed, and she's really good.
Well, speaking of prepared, so I read these 4 chapters that are left in 2 Corinthians, but you have to kind of view them in totality.
No, it's a block. It's his closing block, no doubt about it. It's a
closing block because I mean, you tend to go verse by verse, chapter by chapter, maybe. But in this section, if you're going to follow along, you just need to read all 4 chapters.
Right. I call it the final defense. Like when I read it and outlined it, because to me it was like this whole thing in 2 Corinthians, to me, has been a response to what he dealt with in 1 Corinthians, because it's almost like he's. One minute he's apologetic, like, look, this is rough, I know, you. But then he comes back, he's like, but we can do this together. So it's like he's just this riding the rail.
True, but I mean, look, I told you I was kind of convicted on reading 8 and 9 because I usually, as a general rule, don't like to hear lessons on giving. But there's a difference in that and hearing what God has to say through the Holy Spirit through this situation through Paul.
Correct.
It was awesome. And I feel the same way here. I know I've read these chapters before, but I don't guess I read them in their totality enough to where I was thinking practically. And there was a couple things that stood out before we get into it to me, is that you don't usually think of people not being believers in the church.
Right.
I mean, you think, oh, the world's out here, and then the church is in here, and what I mean by that is the building. But there was a lot of people here that he's addressing that were insulting Paul. I mean, he doesn't really get into it because he didn't have his feelings hurt, and he's like, hey, great, if you want me to be a fool, I'll be a fool. Do you want me to become weak so the kingdom advance? I'll become weak. And then he kind of plays a game in there when he says, but if you want to get into boasting, let's play that game. And he starts talking about what he's gone through. Mm-hmm. And Sadie actually read that yesterday where he, I don't know if I've ever read anything like it. When he just talked about what he went through for the kingdom, which we'll get to it in 11. But what stood out to me is I should never complain or argue about things not going my way. Because here's a man who, how many books did he write?
At least 13, maybe 14.
13 books.
If he wrote Hebrews, it's 14.
And the man was just probably scarred from head to toe. Had been beaten, whipped, lost everything, shipwrecked. And now he's got people in the church just ridiculing him, and so he addresses that. It's almost like, it reminded me of, I forgot what movie that is. I'm sure someone will remind me that it's like when the guy got what was that movie? When he wrote the memo, that he got all excited or something about his work, and so he writes a memo. He's like, "We're going to change the way we operate here." Well, that led him 2 days later to get fired. Because he put a memo in everyone's little drawer. Uh-huh. They fired him. They're like, way too radical a thought here. But and my point is, it's sometimes when people rally against you, it's hard for us to look above that at the big picture and say, fine, you can ridicule me all I want, but I'm still going to love you. I'm still going to be here for you, and I'm still going to try to get the gospel to the world, which is what he's trying to do.
Right.
And I said all that to say this. I concluded their main problem was that they didn't feel like Jesus was enough. Wasn't enough.
Yep.
You had to have some great articulation.
Yep.
You had to have some great arguments, because he brings all this subtly in the next.
As he said in Romans, he said the same thing to the church at Rome. As the scripture says, everyone who trusts in him will never be put to shame. There's no difference between Jew and Gentile. The same Lord is Lord of all, and richly blesses all who call on him. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. He's trying to make it simple, because with the Corinthians, he was having trouble with this very text that Paul wrote to the Romans. How then can they call on the one whom they not believe? Now, he's the tip of the spear. And watch, how can they believe in the one of whom they've not heard? This is Romans 10. How can they hear without someone preaching to them? He's giving them big picture. How can they preach unless they're sent? As it's written, how beautiful the feet are of those who bring good news. That's just point to the Corinthians. But not all of the Israelites accepted the good news. There's going to be splintering. There's going to be division. All he's saying ends up by saying faith comes from hearing the message, and the message is heard through the word of Christ. He said, didn't they hear their voices going out to all the earth, the words to the end of the world? He said, this thing is going worldwide. And Jase, if you just step back a little over 2,000 years later, we now sit here. Look at the division, this denominational thing, and the splintering and the dividing that's happened to Christianity, when right at the center of it is Jesus coming down in flesh, dying on a cross, being buried and raised from the dead, went back into heaven. He's at the right hand of God, mediating for his people. Faith in that, repentance and baptism, you're in. It's that simple. Yep. But just look at what the theologian, I don't know all, but from the time Paul was trying to get the Corinthians, he was saying, man, I mean, this is a tough thing to do here.
Right.
Well, not only was it a tough thing to do, 2,000 years later proves you needed somebody like him who has the final word. God sent. God chose this guy who had been a murdering thug. He chose him to write down what we now read with the Corinthians. So, by Colossians, I read it the other day, he said the gospel had been preached to every creature under heaven.
Yep.
They all heard it.
Well, there wasn't as many people back then.
Wasn't as many people, but according to Colossians chapter 1, that everybody has heard it, every creature.
Which was really interesting, Dad, because he makes
Which was the goal of the whole thing.
Well, he makes that point later in this section we're going to be talking about, that his goal is to get beyond their region. He said, we got to get beyond Macedonia. And he also said, I'm not going to be bad-mouthing somebody who's doing the same work we are. Right.
We don't want to step on them.
Right.
They're over here, and they're a little bit off here and off there, but he was saying, but the gospel is coming. The only way this thing turned into a worldwide phenomena, as they say, is faith comes from hearing the message. At least 2,000 years later, Jesus is known worldwide. Take him or leave him, hate him or love him, he's still there, Al.
Yes.
The message is still there.
Let's take a break. So I got a house full of people, Jase, because we had everybody in for Willie's roast. It takes a village to have a Willie party.
Yeah.
So Lisa told me she's gonna be washing sheets all day, because she's one of these that people come over to your house, you're not exactly sure, so you got to take all the sheets off and wash them.
Oh, they do it. I think that's standard operating.
Yeah, which is not bad. So one of the things that you get at our house, which you may not at some houses, when you sleep on one of my beds, you're going to be sleeping on bowl and branch sheets, because they are the best, no doubt about it. Great touch to them, great feel. They're made with the highest quality threads on earth, which is pretty good. They have over 10,000 stellar reviews. They say about themselves, and I agree, this has a buttery feel to the sheet. So I want you to check these guys out. They're 100% free from toxin. No pesticides, no harsh chemicals are ever made. They're going to give you a 30-night risk-free trial with free shipping and returns on all orders. So there's no reason not to try this product. You're going to love it. I promise you, you won't be sending them back. So if you missed the Bowl and Branch April sale, you get 20% post-sale site-wide discount through the end of April with promo code Robertson at bowlandbranch.com. That's bowl, BOLLAND, branch.com. Use the promo code Robertson, 20% off through the end of April. Check them out.
What I think we should do, and I'd like to read this, because I think he kind of entertains their accusations, not in a playful way, but there's a lot of quotations in here where he's saying, it's not like it's sarcasm, but what would you call it? It's like, you're calling me timid, quotation marks. So
I think it is sarcasm. I mean, it's it's hard for us to imagine that out of a New Testament writer, but there's several times in Corinthian letters.
What they were saying was leading to division and chaos within the body of Christ. He was trying to get them to see.
Well, what I think we should do is read the end. I just want to refer to it because we'll get there again. But because he kind of plays this game with them, like that they're playing. I mean, I don't want to say it's playing a game. I don't know how else to characterize it for a couple chapters. It's like he's being coy.
Yeah.
But not really. But then he gets to the end in chapter 12 and like 20. I think this is the heart of the matter, these next few verses, what he was saying. He said, "For I am afraid that when I come, I may not find you as I want you to be, and you may not find me as you want me to be." That's going to be obvious in the 3 chapters before this, what we're fixing to read. "I fear that there may be quarreling, jealousy, outbursts of anger, faction, slander, gossip, arrogance, and disorder. I'm afraid that when I come back, God will humble me before you, and I will be grieved over many who have sinned earlier and have not repented of the impurity, sexual sin, and debauchery in which they have indulged." So he kind of gets to the heart of the matter here, which that's
popped up all along.
Yeah, their life. The bottom line is you're accusing me of not being an eloquent speaker, and I don't know what I'm talking about, and y'all have these super apostles that you're following, and you don't necessarily need
There's a lot of sin in here.
Yeah, but he's like, bottom line here, you're doing a lot of cutting up. And just look, as a general rule, because you think about what he's trying to say, you shouldn't be getting your theology from someone who is morally corrupt in their life. Just think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, if someone is morally bankrupt out there and then they're wanting to argue about all these religious thoughts, well,
there's plenty of them,
I think he lost whatever you're doing's not working, sir. So that's kind of what he's saying.
It's called credibility.
So then when he says in verse 2 of chapter 13, he says, "I already gave you a warning when I was with you the second time. I now repeat it while I'm absent. On my return, I will not spare those who sinned earlier or any of the others." So he goes back to what he just said. He's like, I'm going to confront this.
We're going to deal with it.
Yeah. And then I think here's the problem when I said Jesus is not enough. It's a sense that you are demanding proof that Christ is speaking through me. Because they're saying, you're not even, whoever this Jesus is, because they had to be reminded.
Who are you to tell
15, us? He's definitely not speaking through you because you're just not very good. That was their situation. You remember in 1 Corinthians 2 when he said he was saying that he wasn't very talented. He said, "When I came to you, I did not come with eloquence or superior wisdom."
Yep.
Because they're saying that. You're even here. He's like, "I'm not a trained speaker," and you evidently have some.
He almost says earlier, "I write better than I speak."
All right. Then he says, "For I resolved to know nothing while I was with you except Christ Jesus and him crucified. And I came to you in weakness and fear and with much trembling. My message were not with wise and persuasive words, but a demonstration of the Spirit's power so that your faith might not rest on men's wisdom," which is what they were doing, but rather on God's power, because he's addressing that again. So then he gets then it says in verse 4, that since you are demanding proof that Christ speaking through me, he is not weak in dealing with you, but is powerful among you. And then he goes back to Christ. He takes the high road. For to be sure, he was crucified in weakness, yet he lives by God's power. Likewise, we are weak in him, yet by God's power, we will live with him. Look, to serve you. He's not taking it personal, as much as I think most people would in the church, including me. I'd have a hard time loving these people.
It'd be tough.
So then he says, examine yourselves. Now, this I think is the most stern thing, to see whether you're in the faith. You need to take a good personal character inventory. Test yourselves. And then I love this. Do you not realize that Christ Jesus is in you? Unless, of course, you fail the test. And I will trust that you will discover that we have not failed the test. I just thought that we should read that first, because that's what he's going to get to in his analysis, because he starts off in chapter 10 talking about, look,
he's saying everybody should analyze themselves, their behavior, and does it correspond with a repentant, born-again servant? Is that adding up?
That's what he's saying. There's a problem here. You don't agree with me. I'm trying to promote Jesus. I'm being humble and gentle and meek, and even looking the other way of you insulting me. And what are you doing? A lot of cutting up. That's just what that's what it was down to.
Yeah, and you think about it.
That carried on through all the way to 2022.
That's what I'm saying. It's still going on today. I mean, how many times have you seen people?
But to your point, let's take another break. To your point, Jace, remember at the very beginning of 1 Corinthians, the problem was they were following men instead of Christ. That began the process. To your earlier point, if you get your focus,
that's still going on.
Still there, and if you get your focus there, then all of a sudden there's disunity. Then there's all these issues selfishness that was there, and then you get these sinful situations. I mean, it's against that progressive nature of sin is what happens, and it starts with not being firmly fixed in Christ. That's why Hebrew writer said, "Fix your eyes on Jesus."
Even Christian people, various churches, they embrace horrific, sinful sins, and they just men having sex with men, women with women. You start reading through the list, and you say, "Wait a minute here." I mean, the Corinthians, they were struggling with the same thing.
Well, Zach and I talked yesterday. We were talking about preaching, and I told him, I said, I feel like this is kind of the second bite of the apple for me to preach, because I've been preaching just a volunteer. And what I've realized this time, and the podcast has helped me, our discussions, that the person of Jesus, the person and story of Jesus, needs to be at the heart of every presentation. And because it is in the book. So where people get off, I think from a pastoral perspective, is when they get issue driven or, whatever, doctrine driven, where everything is, what does the Bible say about?
They go with the culture instead of the Creator.
So then you get caught up in that, and you can miss Jesus. I mean,
exactly.
It's a hard thing.
I did something you probably should never do, but since I'm not getting paid to speak at churches, I just did it because they asked me to teach a class. Well, I go in and the class is called Personal Evangelism, and it was just for the leaders. So what I did was
trash that right out the back.
I just ripped the title. I was like,
some poor person who made it up and sitting out there all embarrassed.
is give you some insight in how to introduce Jesus. I'm not gonna call it evangelism because that word is not in the Bible.
Not in the Bible. That's true.
I was like, because in that case, only an evangelist would qualify. It's just crickets. It's just a name, Chase. But nobody said anything. But I just thought, well, that's how we miss this stuff.
It is.
All right, let's do a program where we're going to talk about sharing Jesus and put it into a category called evangelism. I thought we should be sharing Jesus in every way possible. Everyone together.
Which is the whole concept of minister of reconciliation.
Because people say, well, some people are skilled in evangelism. No, some people are skilled in, maybe door knocking or writing letters, but there's different ways to accomplish the same goal.
Right.
It's not a category of Christianity of sharing Jesus, and I think Paul illustrates this here. He kept getting back to, as long as the gospel's getting out there, I don't even care if I'm weak or if I'm shipwrecked or if you're mad at me or you call me a name or even if you're cutting up. As long as it keeps going out, we're moving with that. Yep. I mean, he was literally saying by all means.
Well, the good news is it's still here. Jesus is still here.
Yeah.
And the gospel's still the gospel.
Right.
Just stick to it. It's not rocket science. That couple yesterday said, this seems so simple. When we just read it, we obey it. I said, it is simple. It's not rocket science. You don't have to be a brain to figure this out.
No, and look, the beauty part of it is it's wherever you are. I was in Pennsylvania last week and met a couple of young veterans, and they had been deployed, and so they were telling me about, how much the podcast had spoken to them being, 7,000 miles away from home in a desert somewhere, that where you really need to be thinking about your relationship with Christ. You're getting a situation like that.
Think about it, Al. I'm 76 years old. Have you ever heard me refer to myself as being an evangelist? You've never heard me say that.
But
I'm not an evangelist. I don't know what exactly that is, but...
well, the definition of it, you kind of fit, but
yeah,
you're
I
right.
agree.
I mean,
I was just making the point that evangelism, they seem like, we have a leadership because that they think it's just a small group of people's job to share Jesus. I don't know where that came from.
I always say that, Al, I've been saying it for 50, 60 years. Watch out for the isms.
Well, that was a good point.
That's a good point.
My point is, are we
a lot
all,
of isms are in the church, too.
Are we all ambassadors of Christ?
I think we are. I think that was clear from 2 Corinthians 5.
Well, why don't invent words? I don't like it when people do sermons or lectures on words that were invented post-Bible.
What if the title of the class had been Kingdom Ambassadors?
You'll be getting somewhere there.
How to be a more effective kingdom ambassadors.
I made a comment and I moved on, but I'm not gonna dwell on it and say, "Oh, you're in danger. You've added to the Bible." No, I'm not gonna be some hardhead on it. It's because people, I don't think their motives were wrong. Now, in this case, if there's a lot of cutting up going on, that's a different thing.
Yeah.
And I think it was. And even then, Paul was he's still trying to say, you're never going to stop me from loving you. He says that in there. He's
exactly.
like, I'm going all the way. Their biggest problem, I think, is summed up from something we read earlier in 2 Corinthians 4 or 5. Now it makes sense when he said, for we do not preach ourselves, but Jesus Christ as Lord. Mm-hmm. I mean, they were promoting themselves. Because he gets to verse, I guess we can save that first paragraph of 10 because I know we have a lot to talk about there. But,
yeah, definitely.
But I like how they say, it's a negative thing, but in chapter 10 and verse 12, he says, we do not dare to classify or compare ourselves with some who commend themselves. Because, they were commending their own measures. When they measure themselves by themselves and compare themselves with themselves, they are not wise. That's why he said I brought this up many times, almost 100 times in the letters, he referred to Jesus as Lord, which is way more than the normal in the New Testament. Because they had a submission problem. They were going around promoting themselves and comparing themselves with themselves. Well, you just think about it. No wonder there's so much corruption in their life. Because what is the source of sin? Most people say, well, it's the devil. Now, he mentions his role in here at least 3 times in the last 4 chapters.
Right.
But, the book of James is pretty clear that God is not tempting us. Each one is tempted when by his own evil desire he is dragged away as enticed. And then he goes on to say, where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. That's James 3:16. So that's why they're not promoting Jesus. Why? Because they're promoting themselves. Well, what happens when you promote yourself? You start cutting up.
Yeah.
Yep.
See, because that's what sin is. You're trying to look and please yourself.
So let's take another break. But don't you think, Dad, that one verse that he read, verse 12, is this culture we currently live in on steroids? Compare all standards to yourself. Yeah. In other words, and here's the way they'll word it now. Oh man, so you're speaking your truth. Yeah, that's your truth for you. That's, I can respect that. And
here's the way they phrase it, Alex. Be you.
Yeah, you be you.
So that sounds good.
That's your truth.
You be you. And I want to raise my hand somewhere. Every time I be me, bad things happen.
But doesn't it always wind up in these immoral, crazy, like, who would have ever thought of somebody doing this lifestyle? I mean, this is where it ends. You're right. When you unshackle it, that it's only driven by what I think about myself, and that's my standard, that's a low standard.
Whew.
I need something much bigger than that.
That's why I said these 4 chapters were way richer than I realized.
Yeah, because you got to take them as a collective.
Well, and I just think in our culture, this same thing's going on. It's actually worse now today when you just look at the world, because he's going to get into this spiritual battle. But what's also for us is that we get mad in the church where Paul didn't. I mean, he was willing to overlook their immaturity and their just unbelief. I don't know how else to call it.
Right.
I mean, if you're believing in yourself and not Jesus as Lord, you're an unbeliever. And he's just, I mean, that is your struggle. That doesn't mean that he can't write. How many letters did he wind up writing them? 4 that we know, or 2 that we have, but a couple more. And these visits, he's coming and all this is going on, but he just didn't take it personal. I mean, to me, that's what stood out, because it makes me mad when people attack me over, especially things that I just absolutely know they're wrong on, and it's hard to just overlook that and say, let me look at the big picture here. I mean, because that's where I gotta apply this to me, because we're persecuted from even our own number.
Yep.
And I think in Paul's case, you're right, Jase. It would have been easier for him with the Corinthians had he not lived there a year and a half, and he loved them deeply because he spent all that. And he spent more time with this church, as far as we read, than any other one in terms of physically being there. So I think it does. I think it was deeper, and which is why he had to keep saying what he's saying. I mean, he's like, I love you.
One thing, it made some funny. It's not funny, but just it's some funny banter. I mean, he gets into this, and it just gets.
Yeah.
By the way, I know there's going to be people who ask, I've heard a lot of different comments, to keep me from becoming conceited because of these surpassing and great revelations. God's working with him close. There was given me, I mean, he almost says, for somebody to be given the revelations that I've seen, he said, in the midst of all that, so that he wouldn't get the big head, I guess, there was given me a thorn in my flesh. I don't believe at all that it was a thorn on a locust thorn tree that had pierced him.
No, it may have.
But he had a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan, so it's not good, to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Maybe he's just saying throughout all of this, about being conceited, and y'all are trying to attack me, and you wanting me to, and he's trying to answer them, tells them he loves them, and keep the main thing. But in the midst of all that, he said, this just, I was given a thorn. What do you think he meant by that?
A lot of people have theories about it. Mine is.
I've heard so many people,
I've always thought the simplest explanation, and it could be totally wrong, is he was talking about his sight, because we know from the end of Galatians and other place, he never saw well again after he was struck down on the road to Damascus. It would have been a messenger of Satan, because it's
spiritually he saw, but physically couldn't see.
I think he was asking the Lord, will you restore my sight? And he was like, no, you're good like you are, because it is a reminder. And the reason I think he says a messenger of Satan is because the reason he was struck down is he was working for the evil one and thought he was doing the right thing.
Yep.
That's the ultimate.
I mean, my take on it
that's always been my take, but that's kind of
what would you answer that with, Jase?
Yeah, it's weird.
But that makes sense to me.
It's weird how we're all in the same family. We have totally different takes on things. I've always looked at that as, because people usually blame God for bad things happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then they blame the evil one for sin happening in our life. So that's why I read the James 1. I don't think he should be blamed for sin. I think the evil one is real good at three things. He's real good at offering pain, pleasure, and position. Now, none of those three things are necessary.
Homiletics, that's really good. Pain, pleasure, and
it just
position.
Popped into my head. I'm sure somebody else came up with it, but the Holy Spirit threw it in there. And so my point is, none of those things are necessarily sinful. Right?
Correct.
That's right.
So those are the temptation. I mean, that's a platform where temptation occurs. I mean, when you think back to Jesus being tempted in the wilderness, I guarantee you I haven't looked because, like I said, those three things popped in my head. But I'm sure that platform was there. He hadn't eaten very much in 40 days, if at all. And the position I know, because I remember him saying, "I'll give you." So you see everything you have here, and I think to Sadie's point yesterday, she was talking about this, that it was more the evil one offering him the same thing without the sacrifice, which I think was a good point. Because you're like, most people just dismiss that, like, well, Jesus had anything anyway, but he had become a human, and it's like, well, let's just rule the world. But my way, you don't have to. I mean, I don't think the evil one knew that he was going to be sacrificed, but the temptation or the platform provided the temptation, which is, yeah, I don't have to die on a cross for my sins. So my point is, I think here when he said the reason the Lord allowed it and the reason the messenger of Satan did that was so that a temptation would happen for him to deny God. Take this away, God. But he just realized God allows that so you'll depend on me. That's why he kept saying, I'm weak and I'm a fool, so that everybody will know the power's coming from God. Right. But he also recognized it because he wrote about it, that God allowed the messenger of Satan to bring pain, physical pain into my life to see what I'm going to do with it. But that's why when he starts off in chapter 10, to my point, you can't really understand this unless you put all the 4 chapters together. He's like, it's a spiritual war. Well, the evil one specializes on physical, of making those 3 things that I said, the position, the pleasure. These are all physical things that happen to us to try to get to the spiritual.
So let's flesh that out a little bit more in our overtime. Remember, it's blazetv.com/unashamed if you want to subscribe to Blaze and get our little 15 or so minutes of overtime sessions that we do along with our podcast. So check us out on the other side.
Thanks for listening to the Unashamed podcast. Help us out by rating us on iTunes. And don't miss an episode by subscribing on YouTube, and be sure to click that little bell to get notified about new episodes. And for even more content that you won't get anywhere else, subscribe to Blaze TV at blazetv.com/unashamed.